Hello, I am the Jaquio. Welcome to Bad 90s Music. Today I have a very important question for you. Have you accepted the gospel of G-Funk as your personal Lord and Savior? G-Funk was the dominant sound of rap in the early to mid-90s. It was like how today the sound of rap is mostly trap. Keep in mind that I barely even know what trap is, and yet I've heard about it enough that I know that it's at least a thing. That's the same way that G-Funk was in the 90s. It started with Dr. Dre's The Chronic, arguably the first G-Funk. Did you know that Warren G produced some of the songs on The Chronic? I didn't realize that. Warren G was probably the guy who epitomized the G-Funk sound the most. I mean, he named his album after it and everything. He acted like he came up with it. And he did have a pretty good hand in creating it and taking it about as far as he could. At the same time, he didn't quite get to the level of an icon of somebody like Dr. Dre or Snoop Dogg. He did know Snoop Dogg back in the day. Him, Snoop Dogg, and Nate Dogg were all in a crew called 213 back in the day. Warren G started off his career basically as a hip-hop producer, producing beats. He was the stepbrother of Dr. Dre. So Warren G did do some production work. He did contribute to some of the tracks on The Chronic, and he basically helped Dr. Dre come up with this new sound. So rap in the 90s was basically divided into three categories coming into the 90s. There was old school rap, Run DMC, that kind of stuff that was just still kind of barely hanging on. There was conscious/political rap, stuff like Public Enemy, Tribe Called Quest, rap that aspired to be a little more abstract, a little more thoughtful. And there was pop rap, basically like Vanilla Ice and MC Hammer, and that was it. At some points between the late 80s and the early 90s, the hardcore, more underground type of political rap started to morph into gangsta rap because of NWA, which Dr. Dre was a part of course. He was a big part of that sound shifting, but really before Dr. Dre started creating the G-Funk era, he was kind of a Public Enemy wannabe. Like, that was what the beats on Straight Outta Compton sounded like. They sounded like Bomb Squad beats. All of that stuff that DJ Yella and Dr. Dre were producing and creating at the time, they were the kinds of stuff that you would hear from Public Enemy, so very dense production, very hard-hitting beats, and a lot of samples just layered on top of each other. You know, G-Funk took that style, that same basic approach, and sort of smoothed it out, and sort of just narrowed it down to a few core components. The heavy bass line, the drum beats were still pretty forceful, but everything got way mellowed out at this point. But they were still rap, you know, they were still hardcore rap. The lyrics were still about gangster concerns, still about drugs and killing people, but yet the sound, they realized they didn't need to have as much noise in the mix. They didn't need to have the sound be as disorienting or as confrontational as something like Public Enemy. You could do a sound that was still nice to listen to, while the vocals and the lyrics were still trying to be as tough and brutal as possible. Warren G finally comes into this. He was working as a producer at this time when Dr. Dre's just blowing up big, or as a solo artist in his own right with The Chronic, and at a certain point Warren G decided, hey, why don't I do the same thing? As a producer, Warren G's first breakout song was this little track called Indo Smoke by a guy named Mr. Grimm. I don't really know him from anything else other than this track, but this is sort of the track that put Warren G on the map as a producer.
In the house, you know what I'm saying? 'Cause it's that time.
This is him doing his sort of annoying chipmunk voice character called the G-Child. You hear this character recur throughout his album.
A Warren G production sits in the tape deck as Mr. Grimm raps overlaps, don't say shit, just listen and recline for a spell.
This honestly kind of sounds like a Cypress Hill track to me. You know, you can hear the basic tenets of the G-Funk sound in there. That synth bass line kind of carries the whole rhythm, and he's got these little trippy, higher-pitched sounds. There are a lot of famous rappers in this video, by the way. I'd never watched it before. It's got Tupac in it, it's got Q-Tip, Tone Loc, Nate Dogg is in it, Warren G. Oh, so Warren G was a rapper from Long Beach.
My name is Nate D-O-double-G, and I'm coming straight from the east.
And there's Nate Dogg's vocals on this track. Nate Dogg's going to be very important to Warren G's career. So that track sort of got his career going as a producer, and then later on he produced and recorded a rap song, sort of a rap duet with Nate Dogg called Regulate. And this song, they kind of recorded, I read about the making of this song, and it's really impressive. They actually recorded this in their own home studio in like somebody's bathroom in Long Beach or something. This track appeared on the Above the Rim soundtrack, which is a basketball movie starring Tupac, in 1994.
Regulators. We regulate any stealing of his property. We're damn good, too.
It's dialogue from the movie Young Guns, by the way. I'm always in favor of rappers comparing themselves to cowboys. I'm on record about that.
Regulators! Mount up!
So this sample is from the song I Keep Forgetting by Michael McDonald, sort of blue-eyed soul funk song. Sampling is a bit of a controversial issue throughout the history of rap. This is just after the copyright laws had changed or had been updated to make it harder for people to produce records like De La Soul's 3 Foot High and Rising or Beastie Boys' Paul Boutique, which used like an abundance of samples just on every single track. This made it so that basically rappers were down to maybe 2 or 3 samples per track was about all they could afford. That kind of necessitated the creation of a musical genre like G-Funk, which could keep things a little bit simpler and yet still somehow make itself compelling. So this is I Keep Forgetting by Michael McDonald, which forms the basis of the Warren G track. It's basically the entire song. Warren G just took that whole loop and just made a whole track out of it. You know, it's interesting to think about a young black man in Long Beach in the 90s listening to this track and deciding to make a song out of it, but that's kind of how rap evolves. It's pretty cool. So I kind of feel like, in my opinion, Warren G took that sample and made, I don't know, kind of a harder, more forceful song out of it. I'm not sure how he accomplished this. Listen to the production on this. This song still bumps.
Just hit the east side of the LBC on a mission trying to find Mr. Warren G.
Nate Dogg and Warren G just go back and forth trading stanzas on this, I guess you would call them, rap verses. And what's interesting about this track is that Warren G is not the hero of it. See, Warren G never ended up becoming as big of a star. He had a lot of great success with this track and several others, but he didn't really embed himself into the public consciousness as forcefully as other 90s rappers alongside him, and I really think that's because he wasn't that type of guy. He always came across as more of a low-key, mellower, sort of self-effacing type of guy, and you hear that on his album too. When you listen to the album Regulate G-Funk Era, it's really more of a mixtape featuring Warren and a bunch of his friends than it is a solo album in his own right. He gets a few chances to shine on his own, but it seems like he's more comfortable actually sharing the spotlight. So it's significant that he has a feature from Nate Dogg in this track, and I really wish they would have done more tracks together for this album, but apparently there was some kind of label dispute with Nate Dogg since he was signed to Death Row at the time. Warren G was signed to Def Jam. He couldn't even appear in the video for Regulate, which is too bad because the song basically tells a story about Warren G getting jacked, looking for girls, and then all of a sudden some dudes start stealing his stuff.
They took my rings, they took my Rolex. I looked at the brother, said, damn, what's next?
And then Nate Dogg sees him, he sees Warren getting jacked, and he pulls out his gun and just shoots all of those dudes, murders them in the streets, and then after that Warren G and Nate Dogg go back out looking for girls again.
I laid all them busters down, I let my gat explode. Now I'm switching my mind back into freak mode.
And that's the entire story of the song Regulate, but I think it's interesting, I've always thought it was interesting that Warren G basically allows Nate Dogg to be the one who bails him out of this situation in this story. You didn't hear that a lot of rappers doing that. You heard them rapping about how hard street life was and all that stuff, and maybe something bad would happen to them, but not at the expense of making themselves sound like some kind of badass survivor, or at least someone who could hold their own in the streets. Warren G's situation is basically just to play the victim in this song so that Nate Dogg can save his life at the end. I just thought that was pretty cool of him to do that. Let someone else be the badass.
It's kinda easy when you listen to the G'd up sound. Pioneer speakers bumping as I smoke on the pound.
So this track is Warren G kind of reminiscing about growing up in Long Beach. Went from, I guess, gangbanging or being a gangster to being a musician.
And I used to gangbang, but now it's a G thing.
And the song was another big hit. This is more or less basically just a solo track. So after the greatness of Regulate, which is a song where he shares a spotlight with Nate Dogg, he proves that he can have a hit song on his own. I just really like the production in this one. This is like a blaxploitation style song.
Cause if you do, you know where I'm from. Rat-tat-tat-tat, diddy-dum, diddy-dum.
Warren's rapping is never anything special, but he made up for it with the production. He wouldn't be the first rapper who's a better producer than he is an MC, and he never calls himself the MC. If you listen to the last track, he says this DJ. He's very careful not to label himself.
Hop up and away, it's the super soul sis. I talk so much shit, I got halitosis.
This is a song called Super Soul Sis. The rapping is from Joss Skills. I don't even think Warren appears on this song. This is what I mean when I say that his first album is more like a mixtape than anything else. He's also got another track that he's not even on. Well, at least not as a rapper. I'm sure he produced part of this, but this song is called This Is The Shack. It's actually a Dove Shack song.
This is the shack. This is how we act.
The Dove Shack was a group made up of 3 guys, Bo Rock, C Knight, and 2 Scoops. This is their debut track.
So pack up your gear and run it high. And pass the doje to the left-hand side.
And Warren G just let him put it on his album. That's what a lot of rappers did back in the day. Like, if you listen to GZA's Liquid Swords, the last track on that is called Bible basic instructions before leaving Earth, and it's just a Killah Priest song. It's just as not on it at all. But rappers would do that to sort of boost each other, or to sort of give each other, you know, an opportunity to be heard.
Summertime in the LBC. Damn, it's hot than a mother.
Speaking of Dove Shack, this was probably their biggest song, called Summertime in the LBC. I'm not sure whether Warren produced this for them. He does get a shout out in the song.
The hoes wanna kick it with me, 'cause I ran with Warren G.
And this was a big hit the year, probably 1995 or so.
You don't see what I see. Every day as Warren G, I take a look over my shoulder as I get older, getting tired.
So if I had to say why I thought Warren G's career didn't last as long as it could have, I think part of it was due to the sampling getting a little less imaginative. You heard the sample of I Keep Forgetting, how he transformed that into a banger of a classic rap track. And then you have, from his second album, this was about 1996. Oh, his second album is called Take a Look Over Your Shoulder, but this song originally appears on the soundtrack for Super Cop, the American version of the Jackie Chan film, and it's What's Love Got to Do With It. And it's basically just a straight up cover of What's Love Got to Do With It, featuring Adina Howard.
It's all about the dope, so what's love got to do with it?
What's love got to do with it?
I also think Warren tried to stand out a little more as a rapper here, which, you know, he never really got that much better at, but I think he was trying a little harder here.
Now your trigger finger got the itches, scheming on my riches, which is not a surprise, my eyes peep game.
I do think he was trying to be a little harder on this song too, and it didn't quite work with him. So when his second album did drop, Take a Look Over Your Shoulder, this ended up being the actual first single from it. It's called I Shot the Sheriff, and again, it's another cover of I Shot the Sheriff.
I shot the sheriff.
But I did not shoot the deputy.
I think this is the cover of Eric Clapton's version or something. There's also a remix of it that sampled EPMD, but it's the same basic song.
They tryna stick me with some shit that I did not do. You know who, the boys in blue. There they go with their assumptions.
Yeah, this is the EPMD remix of I Shot the Sheriff. You know, it's alright, but it's still sampling classic rap. Yeah, I mean, a lot of rappers were doing this at the time too, just basically straight up covers of old songs that people recognized. It was kind of easy to get lost in the shuffle that way. You're definitely not having Nate Dogg come out with anything. I think there might be a mashup track of Michael McDonald and Warren G called I Keep Forgetting to Regulate. Let me see if I can find that. Good times. I'm sorry, I keep going back to this one. I keep forgetting to not listen to it. Even this is a better version of the original song. I'm not sure how he does it. I think it might just be the beat. Warren G did make one more album before the 90s were over called I Want It All. And by this point, nobody was really doing any G-Funk anymore. Rap had sort of shifted to stuff that was more sounding like Outkast. Timbaland, you know, was the big producer by this time. Southern rap had also become a big thing between this time, so people weren't really giving the West Coast too many props. That style sort of took over, or took the place of what G-Funk had been before. So let's see what this sounds like. I Want It All. I haven't heard this song since back it was on the radio.
I want it all, brand new socks and drawers, and I'm balling every time I stop and talk to y'all.
Well, this is another G-Funk song. I mean, this could have easily been on his first album. No reason why it couldn't. You know, Warren didn't always have the tightest flow or anything, but I always found his delivery very likable. You know, he just seemed like a chill guy. Maybe that was another thing that made him stand out, or not quite fit in among the other rappers at that time. Anyway, Warren G did continue making music after that. He never quite reached the same heights of success that he had in early 1994. I feel like his sound holds up pretty well. You know, G-Funk itself is probably due for a comeback anyway. Yeah, rap had been through so many changes already that he couldn't even really make his career last throughout the rest of the 90s. Yeah, it's too bad. He seemed like a cool guy, willing to share the credit with the others around him, and, you know, willing to let himself be the one who's getting jacked in the song so that someone else can look like a badass helping him out. So I'd say it's a pretty good representative of 90s rap right there, and I hope people are still discovering this music somehow. I don't know if there's any way for them to do that. I don't know if Yo MTV Raps is still on or whatever. You know, I mean, when you think about big rappers in the 90s, they're all either pretty much dead or kind of legendary. It's a legacy that's a little too intimidating to be approached. You know, because of that, a lot of these more down-to-earth, more grounded dudes like Warren G are sort of a little more laid back in their presentation or in their persona, kind of get lost in the shuffle or kind of fall through the cracks. But I do think that their music deserves to be remembered. This is just good time stuff. Alright, this is The Perfect Saturday by Lonely Island.
Yeah, this beat remind me of back in the day.
You can hear them doing that same G-Funk sound. You know, it still sounds nice.
Let me contemplate, I glance in the cut and I see my homie Nate.
Open the door and see my homie now.
Funk on a whole new level.
The rhythm is the bass and the bass is the treble.
The dub's in my butt and your toilet's in trouble.
Well, until next time, I am the Jake Rio, and I'll see you sometime in the future.